This is our God, the servant King. He calls us now to follow Him, to bring our lives as a daily offering of worship to the servant King, of worship to the servant King.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're continuing to think about service this afternoon, and as you were listening to the introduction music, you would have seen a question on the screen that says, do you find it easier to give something or to receive something? I know that I quite like both in different situations, but I do quite like receiving things. Probably if I had to choose, that would be my preference. But today we're going to think about how true friendships are made strong when we actually give and receive, not just one or the other. I'm going to read to you a poem based on a story that's found in the Old Testament part of the Bible about a man called Elijah and how he was able to give and receive. And I'd like you to join in with this chorus, a refrain part that goes like this. It goes, jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. Jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. Hope you can join in with that from home. Let's go. The rain had stopped falling, streams were dry as bone, so God sent Elijah far away from home, sent him to Zarephath to find something to eat. There's a widow waiting there, she's the one you need to meet. Jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. Jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. Elijah found the widow, she was at the town gate, she was gathering sticks, maybe 7 or 8. Could I have a drink of water, Elijah asked with a smile, and a piece of bread I haven't eaten in a while. Jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. Jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. I don't have any bread, the widow woman shrugged. Just some flour in a jar and some oil in a jug. It'll make one last meal, she said with a sigh. My son and I will eat it, and then I guess we'll die. Jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. Jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. God has given me a message I think you need to hear, said Elijah to the woman. You have nothing to fear. If you make me some bread and bring it on by, the jug and the jar, they will never run dry. Jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. Jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. So the woman made some bread for Elijah and her son, and the jug was just as full as when she had begun. Yeah, the woman made some bread for Elijah and her son, and the jar was just as full as when she had begun. Jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. Jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. So the woman served the prophet her one last bit of food. She trusted in God's promise, and then she understood that serving helps the one who served to live another day, but it helps the one who serves as well in some surprising ways. Yes, it helps the one who serves as well in some surprising ways. Jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. Jugs and jars, oil in the jugs, flour in the jars. Well, I do hope you're able to join in with that from home. I'd like us to reflect on the story. It says, how did the lady serve Elijah? How did Elijah serve the lady? And how did God reward the lady for serving? Perhaps you'd have a little talk about that at home. I think it's quite clear that the lady served Elijah by offering her one last meal. She was prepared to share. The rap that I read, she said, I'm going to eat it with my son and then I guess we'll die. We've got nothing else. But she was prepared to serve Elijah by sharing. Elijah went on to serve the lady by delivering God's promise. God's promise was that they would not go without food during the entire famine. And God rewarded that lady for serving by keeping that promise. The story carries on in the Bible, much longer than the bit of the story that I've read with you this afternoon. And Elijah and this lady came to have a great friendship. Because as we serve one another, our friendships grow. Perhaps you join with me in a prayer. Father God, give us willing hearts to serve others with joy and bring them help and comfort. Give us humility to accept help and service from others with thankfulness and grace. Amen.
Take care, everyone, and stay safe.